Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the penultimate afternoon of the Learning Technology Digital Exchange. Massive thanks to Celine Mullins for hosting sessions this morning. Interesting, diverse range, and delighted to say we've got three quite different but as interesting sessions this afternoon. First up is industrial design. That's one way of looking at it. Instructional design masterclass from the team at Omniplex. In instructional design, sometimes gets a bad press, so I'm keen to hear what the team have to say. The session's pre-recorded, but Jasmine from Omniplex will be on hand to answer your questions afterwards. So please use the chat to comment and discuss, and make note of the questions that you want to ask the team. So, without further ado, let's listen to what I'm looking forward to being an interesting session around instructional design.
Good afternoon, Learning Technologies Digital Experience audience. I am Jasmine and I lead Omniplex's digital learning design agency called Curson. And I'm super excited to be here with you today and actually do something a little different and invite two of my amazing team onto the set today to be in conversation with instructional designers at Curson. So I now would like to invite Ollie and Chris on with me to answer some questions and dig into a little more about instructional design. Chris, how are you?
Good. Pleased to be here and excited to have a chat.
So Chris, tell me, when was the first time you came across the term instructional design? It's not really a discipline that we grow up hearing about. So when was your first time when you actually heard about this, and what did it mean to you?
It's a good question, because when I tell a lot of my friends and family what I do, you get a lot of blank faces. And then when you explain a little bit more that an instructional designer designs e-learning, the immediate question is, well, why do you need someone to design e-learning? It's just a PowerPoint, isn't it? And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the industry about what an instructional designer does. And for me, I think my whole journey is learning about how we take very average or poor learning and make it something special. And a lot of what an instructional designer does is really look at the learner and figure out how can we make this as easy as possible for them to learn, and how can we make it practical for them? How can we make this material something useful that they're going to use in their job? And there's a lot of thought with that, a lot of thinking. And I think especially for the ID role, the instructional designer, it's developing quite rapidly at the moment. And we're learning more and more about the way people think and the way we can actually apply that to learning.
I find the definition of instructional design such a minefield, and actually I feel like in our pursuit to create great e-learning or great digital learning, there is a lot of opportunity to be confounded along the way. So let's dig into that a little more. Chris, tell me, for you, what is the role of an instructional designer in the digital learning process? What is specifically the part that you play? Because of course, we know that there is the development side of it. Of course, we want the learning to be engaging and memorable and interactive. These are things we know that we want the whole piece to be. But specifically, where does an ID come into that?
There's a lot of different ways you can describe it. If you think of a sculptor, you've got a huge piece of rock, and that's all your information, that's your knowledge.
Yes.
Typically when a client or a subject matter expert gives it to us, there's a whole heap of really useful stuff in there, but really want to get to the core part. And a lot of what an ID does is chisel away at that and really give it a bit of shape. And we help a lot of our clients understand maybe information that's good that doesn't need to be in there specifically for that learning goal, and also what the structure should be, what meaningful activities there can be for the learners. And we really try and help make sure that the actual learning has an impact. Because so often information is just knowledge, but it's not actually applied, or there's too much of it. And a lot of what an ID does is really funnel that down. We shake out all that stuff that's not necessarily needed, and get to the real gold of a course, and then apply it to the learners in the best way possible that they get the most from it.
Absolutely. I think curating content and simplifying the complex,
very much,
and keeping the learner, as you said, is really important for that. So, Chris, what do you love most about being an instructional designer? It's obviously what you've chosen to do with your life, and you're very good at it. What do you enjoy most?
Yeah, it's a fascinating role because you work with such a wide range of clients. I've learned about the most fascinating subjects over the years working as an ID. Everything from nuclear medicine to the way cruise ships are built. And it can be something different every week. And you really get to embed in a subject, but not only understand the subject, really distill it down to its core meaning. And I think every new piece of learning is a new adventure and a journey of discovery from the part of an ID to find out how do we get to that endpoint that's going to give something meaningful for the learners.
I think one of the things that you said there that really resonates is just having a curious mind. As you said, you get to actually see such a diverse range of content. And I think part of the skill of an instructional designer, it's sort of like method acting, but it's method learning design. Right? You have to get into the mindset, the industry, the headspace, the learner, the processes of, as you said, nuclear medicine, or it might be the travel industry, it might be the retail sector. And you have to really get in that headspace and do it very quickly and design learning that's going to resonate for that audience, which I think is really, really fascinating. So, it requires you to sort of be somebody who can actually be a real chameleon and just become of the sector, which I find really interesting about what you said. So, Chris, what would you say is the most challenging part of being an instructional designer?
Like any role, no job is perfect. I think there is a lot of stakeholders in the e-learning project, and everyone has that same end goal, but there can be a lot of opinions about the right way to reach that goal. And if you've ever heard the saying, less is more, that's golden in e-learning. We ultimately want to aim to give the learners just what they need. We don't want to overload them.
I think that there's a real temptation to overwhelm learners, and it can often be because a number of people in the process actually want to get a lot of information across. And one of the things that I always bear in mind, it's a sort of little saying, if you like, a phrase, is that if your learners need to learn how to tell the time, don't tell them how the clock was built, because one doesn't help you do the other. One thing I'd really like to ask is what it feels like having gone from being part of an internal L&D team, which many of our audience are, and I think that, Chris, we both experienced that, where you're sort of this lone ranger within your organization. You are the person that is the instructional designer, the content developer, the graphic designer, the tester. You're doing everything. Compared to now, on the other side of it, we're really lucky to work as part of an agency where those roles are different people. So what would you say is the biggest difference, Chris, that you see in having gone from one side to the other?
Yeah, lone ranger is the right word. I think having come from that world and you hear about all the different roles there are in the e-learning industry, and you're like, well, I do all those roles and more. So I think when we work with these clients, we truly understand what they're going through. And it's extremely challenging being a very small team trying to do these large projects. And that's where I think we can really help clients out.
If you had 3 wishes as an instructional designer, what would they be?
Bravery.
Okay.
From everyone, from us, from our clients. Imagine big. I'm going to be greedy, say unlimited budget. Give me that £1 million budget. Let's make some huge VR, elaborate e-learning. Collaboration. I think there's amazing talent everywhere in film, in writing, to work with other rock stars in the industry to really build something of a collaboration style project would be a huge dream. So
bravery, budget and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we can do 2 of those 3.
I'll take 2. We can do 2. I'm happy with 1.
My magic wand. I can do 2 of those 3. I love the being bold. Actually, I think that bravery part is about being bold on our side, which I think we're always willing to do. And also when we work with our customers as well, just having that trust. It's very easy to want to hold on to content and scripting, but actually if you hired a creative agency, let them do their thing, and I think that's we get wonderful results when we when we build and earn that trust with our clients. What advice would you give to those that are watching, that are aspiring instructional designers, that are new to instructional design? Is there one tool, one book, one phrase, something that's really helped you, Chris, as an instructional designer, that you would love to be able to pass on to people watching?
Sure. I think immerse yourself in the industry, digest as much as you can. I think there's some fantastic and inspirational authors and bloggers, people like Kathy Moore. Her information on the way we can approach learning design with action mapping and having tangible goals have been inspirational. And I think the more you read up, the quicker you develop.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Let's do the COVID handshake. You've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for being in conversation with us today.
That's it. Thank you for your
time. So Ollie, your story is really interesting because you actually began your journey with Simon Cowell.
Yeah.
So tell me, when was the first time you came across the term of instructional design, and what does it mean to you? And I'm sure people will be fascinated to know how Simon Cowell links into your story.
So yeah, I first encountered instructional design when I was working on America's Got Talent. I used to have to do the video shoots for the live shows. So a lot of the time when you'd have a live show, you're putting out to 11 million viewers, so it has to go perfect, it has to be brilliant. And in order to do that, I used to shoot mini videos for each different department, so they would understand their cues, understand what they would do. So in fact, my first encounter with instructional design was actually with video, and was filming these mini videos for different people to actually understand what their role was on the day. And obviously with each week it would differ. So it was really interesting. And at the time, I probably didn't even know that it was instructional design.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Did you know it was instructional design that you're doing?
No, I didn't. But...
And that's the thing, because I think there might be a lot of people that are actually watching, a part of L&D teams within an organization, and actually you just get given e-learning to do, and you don't realize part of the process that you're doing is instructional design. So
exactly. And I think that a lot of people have that idea that instructional design is just e-learning and it is just that sort of digital learning. And it's not at all. There's so many different aspects to it. There's like I said, there's video for starters, and that's where I learned
your craft.
My craft, yeah, absolutely. So that was where I really actually found a love for just teaching people how to do things, and it was so successful. It really did boost the performance of the shows. So that was one big win for us.
Tell me, what do you think is the role of an instructional designer? How would you define it?
So for me, an instructional designer is all about taking content or information and making it really engaging and really entertaining. I think it's about giving content imagination, creativity, and just making the learner want to actually view that content.
Tell me, Ollie, what is it that you most love about your job as an ID?
I think it's just that you can be creative on multiple levels. So it's all about taking that content that traditionally we would have seen, where it would have just been content dumps on pages with traditional e-learning, for instance, and now we're moving into this era of like multimedia technology, where we can use all different sources of technology to create the best content we can with learning. And I think that for me, it's just exploring all that technology, exploring new ways of delivering it. And like you said before, I'm big on entertainment and I'm big on engagement. And I think that technology really does help that. So I find that really an interesting aspect of learning, and an interesting aspect of my role is to finding new ways of delivering that engaging content.
I think somebody in our team once described you as the Lewis Hamilton of instructional design. And of course, we need that. We need Formula One to do what it does. I think many people watching are just getting into a go-kart for the first time. And so I think that actually there's a sort of the fundamentals of learning of great instructional design, which are really universal. And what I love about what we do in both when we work with clients and when we are taking really super creative projects, very high-end projects, as you've described, but also when we deliver instructional design training to those that are brand new to it, is that we focus on those fundamentals, because that is universal throughout. And I think you've got these elements that you need to have, learning objectives, you need to have a good structure. If you're having storytelling, create a call to action, create the adventure sequence, create the jeopardy, and then have the conclusion. I think there are some of those basics, which if you follow those, you can then decide how many extra toppings you want, which is all of the other really high end, the multimedia thing. So I think that's really interesting about how we kind of build on.
Absolutely, and it also goes hand in hand with marketing as well. I mean, we're moving more into a marketing era within learning design and especially within instructional design as well. So it's about how we can market the message more than anything else. And I think that's what's really, really interesting about this. It's almost the two roles of blending together, and it's just finding out the right outcome.
One of the challenges that many people have, I think many people in our audience, is that they are the lone ranger within their organization. They are responsible for deploying e-learning within their whole company. I think companies are getting really good at actually investing in in-house capability, and I think that will set to grow. But still, there's a lot of people out there, Ollie, that they have to be the instructional designer, the graphic designer, the content developer, the project manager, and test it, and be the subject matter expert. It's a lot of pressure on an individual.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for those people?
I'd say my first piece of advice would probably be to not put too much pressure on yourself to succeed in every area of that. So it wouldn't be, you don't have to be the best consultant, you don't have to be the best content designer, you don't have to be the best instructional designer. For me, it'd be just focusing on those key aspects that you are good at and try and bring the best out of that. Using technology can really help you succeed in that area as well. And I think my second piece of advice is learn to fail. I think that that's something that every instructional designer has to go through. And if you become more resilient to failing and actually just learning from your fails, you will become a better instructional designer, and you will understand how to create great content in a way that's comfortable for you.
Mm-hmm. What do you love most about your role as an instructional designer?
I think it's just the creative freedom that I have now. And we've said this before. I've come from an internal L&D background, so there was very much of a regressive mindset, and I think that coming into this sort of environment, there's much more of a progressive mindset and much more of a mindset to create the best learning that we can, and to create really engaging, inspiring learning. So for me, it's about just being as creative as you can with content, and I think that that's what I really love about it.
I love that, and I think that one of the challenges that organizations have, especially L&D teams, I felt this frustration myself, like you have, working as part of an internal team, is actually an organization adopts a different mindset when they engage an external agency. So we get the really fun job of being able to be given a creative license, because that's why people have come to us. So actually, I feel like if you're part of an L&D team and you can even just have a conversation with your senior leadership team and say, okay, we need to build this induction, or we need to build this program, or we're doing this back to work, COVID safe learning program. We want to make a splash. And you feel like it's too much to take on yourself, convince your stakeholders to engage with a creative agency. Because part of the process we have to go through is come up with a proposal and actually, create something really exciting and engaging. Like, we have to work hard. I think that creative freedom is hard won, but wow, the value that we can deliver is great. And we get to then work with people and become an extended part of their team. I think that's one of the things that I enjoy actually the most about what we do, is that, people that work in L&D are just really nice people. We have a lovely customer base, they're good people, and to have an opportunity to work with the L&D teams of global brands and actually huge organizations that aren't so well known, but have really fascinating, jobs, in a really interesting industry. And so that would just be a bit of advice I think I would say is, to follow on from that creative freedom, utilize that, because you can have access to it. By all means, get in touch and see if there's something that we can build.
Absolutely.
We often have a lot more creative freedom than you can if you're in-house. What would you say if you were going to give advice to somebody who's new to instructional design, or has been doing it without realizing it, or they're an aspiring instructional designer? Is there an advice or a tool or a mindset or anything that you'd kind of point them in the direction of to say, you know what, you've got to check this out?
Yes, absolutely. And it's something that I've been practicing for the last couple of years. And it's a thing called, it's a process called, or a framework called design thinking. It works so well because I think traditionally what you'll see with most projects is you have the ADDIE framework. So you'd have your analyze, design, develop, implement, and then evaluate. And that's how most instructional designers work. But the problem with that is that the stakeholder or the SME doesn't get involved early enough. And I think that a lot of the time, and I've seen it internally and externally, that the SMEs won't sign off until it's too late. And then, you'll have that mad rush at the end as an instructional designer, especially if you're a one-man band, in completing learning. So what design thinking does is, and I won't go too much into design thinking now, but what it does essentially is it's user-centered. So it focuses on that initial part of the analysis and design part of ADDIE. And it just gets down to the actual problem of what the actual issue is. So it gets down to the real problem of the content, real problem of how to, or the solution as to how to help the learner. Mm-hmm. And what it does essentially is it gives you good concepts, good prototypes, and brings the stakeholder on board early on, gets them to sign it off. So you have so much more time in development, and you actually have a smoother process of actually delivering.
Design thinking, very learner-centric, and defines the requirements of the organization early on so that you can then design the learning around that.
Yes.
Fantastic. If you had 3 wishes as an instructional designer, what would they be?
Unlimited time. Probably unlimited access to tech. And unlimited resource.
Wow.
Because then you could create a movie, couldn't you? And it'd be amazing.
Absolutely fantastic. And I do think, Ollie, that again, we are seeing this real shift towards more and more storytelling, more and more, branching scenarios is something that I think we have all, been very familiar with for a number of years. But actually, film learning is something that I feel is really on the rise as such, and I think people are using film in a much more interesting way. We could talk about this all afternoon, but We're on a time limit. So thank you so much for coming and joining us today, Ollie, for our In Conversation With. Thank you. So there you have it, in conversation with 2 instructional designers here at Curzon. I hope you found that interesting. It was very fascinating for me to be in conversation with both Ollie and Chris, and we would love to join you now for a live Q&A. Do put some questions to us if you haven't already. And, we are Curzon, Omniplex's digital learning design agency. We'd love to hear from you and to have your feedback and be in conversation with you about the learning projects that you're currently working on. So please do keep in touch. We run training courses on this and many other fascinating topics. So stay in touch, and we look forward to seeing you on the live Q&A in just a moment.
Hi, and we're back. How you doing, Jasmine?
I'm good, thank you, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I've been following the chat through in the room, and it has been flying around.
No, I know. What have we started? I feel like the real stars of this actual session is the audience. But that's the great thing about
Yeah,
a TED Talk, an Ed Talk, that actually it should spark an engagement, a reaction, a discussion, a debate. I mean, we've got people disagreeing in
I
there,
know.
and
I know.
emojis galore. It's fantastic. So I just want to say thank you so much to our wonderful audience for getting so engaged about this. And I think the fact that there is such a difference in opinion and experience and perspective actually goes to say we need to be talking about this more. So how should we do this, Andrew? Do you want, because I've got so much to say, but I know there's questions as well. So
Right, so there's a range of questions. So people can vote on the questions that they want to ask. So what I'll do is I'll try and pitch the questions in the orders that I think maybe some of them come together. So I'm going to start off with one from Leslie Ann Gray, because it also ties into one that Juan Prado has asked as well, which is to do with recommendations for instructional design qualifications. Do you think qualifications are needed? And if so, what would you recommend?
I really do think that qualifications are needed. And I think this is one of the things that we don't have in the UK at the moment, is a real industry standard when it comes to qualifications within digital learning in general. And, if you're based in the US, you can go and study this at university level, and you can actually have sort of be educated on this topic. And we just don't have that. The industry doesn't have that profile yet. I think it's fast changing. In fact, Omniplex ourselves, we are in the process of launching our academy, which will have a roadmap of courses that we will be offering to our clients, and then that will have a professional qualification attached to that. So that's something that we're definitely working on. I think that, as in many, many trends, especially to do with tech, but also many other areas of life, we tend to, what is happening in the US tends to come over here second, and we sort of tend to be the next, adopting it next. So I think that a professional qualification for instructional design has long been something that's been long awaited here in the UK. We're working on that. So I'd say to people, continue following what we do. And as the Articulate's UK certified training provider, we also offer training on instructional design. So please come and speak to us about that if you want to know more. There are so many courses out there, but that's the thing, that professional qualification element is missing at the moment in our curriculum, and we're working on it. And I invite the industry to be part of that, because it's not just about one organization. We want to be trailblazing. I'm actually working with the University of Birmingham, where we are launching a digital learning apprenticeship. So that's about introducing this as an industry for the next generation. But those practitioners out there who we've been in the industry for so long and there isn't something there, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you and give you some advice and guidance based on where you are in your career.
I agree with you entirely, Jasmine. I have lots of connections over in the United States, and the conversation with them, with the instructional designers, is always about them qualifying, coming out of education and moving into instructional design. And it's been picked up, and I agree about the apprenticeships as well. And that's also been picked up by, where was it? Denise McGuire said, it would be great if there was an apprenticeship pathway, because lots of people are struggling to utilise the levy pot. So if we were able within the UK to have an ID qualification or apprenticeship route, I think there will be a lot of demand from it. For it,
it's coming, Denise. I sit on that panel along with 20 other universities and also representatives from industry. We're writing the actual curriculum now, and it will be launching within the next 18 months. So that's coming, which I'm really excited about. So watch this space.
Excellent. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty, because we've had a couple of questions about design in itself. So, really interesting question, Denise. Lots of people have voted this one up and said, any advice for making sensitive subjects engaging? I'm in the process of creating a module on domestic abuse and finding it tough.
It is. That's the thing, isn't it? I think in digital learning in general, there is such a variety of topics that are really needed to be part of the conversation, and I think you do have to look at topics like that and actually be able to approach them in a sensitive way. I guess for that specific question, my advice would be use so the best example I ever saw of this, which I think makes it a little bit easier, was around premature deaths in pregnant women. And what they actually did was used a number of things. I think you never ever want to be using kind of stock imagery or photography for this sort of thing. Actually, the ability to be able to use much more subtle imagery, graphics with silhouettes, graphics which are really slow moving, because you want to evoke, the thing is you don't want to downplay it either. That's the thing, it's an important subject. You do want to evoke a reaction, but you don't want to make it too close to home because you don't know how it's going to impact the person who is the learner who's taking that particular learning module. So I think subtlety is key here. I think using fictitious scenarios and really subtle imagery, use slow moving motion in this, create fictional stories, but do create stories, because I think that really helps you to connect with what it is and then ask the learner to say, okay, here's a story. I think having some sort of disclaimer to say, in the way that when you see on certain adverts that this contains sensitive sensitive information that some people may find uncomfortable. Don't be afraid to go there, but I think just use subtlety and make it subtle. It can't be in your face. You're looking to create an emotional story there, and I think anchoring it around stories is really useful, because then you're not having to say, "Oh, think about when this is happening to you." That's not what you want to go there. Give the learner a scenario, make it subtle, make it emotional, make it connect with the learner emotionally, and then ask them to make a judgment call or a response to that. And if you want to get in touch about some more specific advice around that, please do so, because we love to advise on these sorts of things.
Great stuff. So I'm going to follow on with something that's entirely different, or maybe not, okay. Which is, how's the best way to train systems using instructional design?
Oh, right. So, and this is the thing, I think somebody said this on the chat, actually, that, sometimes you have to be jack of all trades. And I think with systems, this is the thing. And I assume that, the question is asking that as an instructional designer, or rather as the person in your learning and development team where your organization or your client has got a new system that they are launching, what's the best way of being able to use digital learning to train that? And here's the thing, I think that there is a real, it's really tempting to say, okay, we're doing systems training, let's go straight into simulations. But remember, the reality is that's not how people learn. I always take it back to, if you or I were going to do some online shopping, for example, and we'd never used a supermarket shopping website before. What we wouldn't do is go into a simulation and pretend to order our groceries in order to learn how to do that. What you need to do is understand the process and the concept. So whilst it's really tempting with systems training to go straight into simulations, I'd actually say that one of the best ways of doing it is start off by using digital learning as a medium for explaining the why and the overall process, and giving people signposts of how and when they need to dip into the system to be able to do X, Y, or Z. I think that's the most important and the best way of using digital learning for systems training. Tell them about the bigger picture and tell them where to signpost to actually be able to find and use the system to do what they need to do. People are pretty tech savvy these days. Systems tend to be pretty well designed. You don't need to irritate and patronize your learners by telling them to log in using a username and password. That's pretty standard. People get that. What they want to know is, why is this system really important? How is it going to save me time? How is it going to make my life better? And where are the specific areas that I need to go to if I want to, raise expenses or whatever it is that I need to do for my organization?
So I'm going to follow that up with a question that I asked, which is, how much of instructional design is knowing what to leave out?
I think so much of the instructional design process, Andrew, is about curating content, okay? And the thing is, as the instructional designer, and the people that are watching, you might not be an instructional designer, that might not be in your job title at all, but might be actually what you're doing is designing for your organization, okay? If you are doing that, and there's a separate conversation about the graphic design and the aesthetic design, we're not talking about that. Instructional design is about the designing the learning, okay? And I think it is so important to know how to curate that content for your audience. You are the gatekeeper of what is going to help them to achieve that task or that learning objective and what isn't. And the scenario that I like to use is, if your learners need to know how to switch the lights on, okay, and that's such a simplistic example, but it's for the sake of this, teaching them about electricity, of what will happen when they press that switch and what is happening behind the scenes on the circuit board of the electricity tells them nothing about switching the lights on. It doesn't help them.
Yeah.
So you've got to know, okay, and it comes back to basics, learning objectives. What do we want our audience to be able to do? And what's the information that will help them do that? And I think you find that you have to take out a lot. I think you have to campaign on behalf of the learner. But I always like to say, I would rather we as learning designers feel the pain of leaving out content so that your learners don't have to. You take that responsibility for your audience.
Yeah, again, I agree entirely. The description I use is, if you're going to teach someone how to cross the road, you don't need to show them the full braking system for BMW 3 Series. And I think that's the difficulty and the balance that we have potentially sometimes with our stakeholders, who expect people to have to know about the braking system of a BMW 3 Series before we teach people to cross the road. And I think that's one of the real challenges that I think for instructional designers is to push back potentially with subject matter experts, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. It is, and it's difficult, it's really hard, and sometimes you can be really unpopular, and I think what's the way in which you do that is by helping your stakeholders to understand, and by giving them examples. If they're giving you 20 slides on something and the most important bit is on slide 21, give them something similar, give them 20 slides of something, ask them a question and say, they won't be able to answer it. It's exactly the same position you're putting your learners in. I think we've got to work to bring our subject matter experts with us and leave the little breadcrumbs so that they figure that out. You've got to work with people, you've got to get them to cooperate and collaborate with you, but don't take the easy route out, which is just put everything in and let your poor learner try and figure out what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Which is entirely then the difficulty in conversation between self-determination, self-direction, and instructional design, and it's finding that balance between them, isn't it? I'm loving the conversation, by the way. Thank you to everybody in the chat. The chat is absolutely flying, and I'm looking at people highlighting resources for each other and have a look at this and so on. So thank you everybody for the chat. The chat will stay on the system, and the questions will as well. We're not going to get through all of these. There's one about TAP diplomas, for example, that I don't want to get into, Ellie, just purely because I think we'll take up too much time. I think there's other questions here that I think are definitely worth looking at. Interesting comment from Lena, just really following on from the comment that we just made, which is companies don't often value instructional design and don't necessarily realise the work that goes into it, the design process and so on, and don't understand the time involved. How do you work with stakeholders and subject matter experts to help them understand exactly what is required?
Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the areas where when we engage with clients as a creative agency, there is a statement of work that starts off the process. There is a toll-gated set project plan, which is, goes through details, all of the steps, and says that, okay, it needs a sign off. These are all the things that we are doing. Presenting that plan to your stakeholders, to your organization, will help them to understand. In the same way that if you are, if you were asked to create a website, it's not just as simple as, well, here's the information, now go off and build the website and then our customers will use it. There is a technical plan, there is a statement statement of work, there is a process, there are sign-off stages to that. I actually think formalizing that process and documenting it, and it gives it the status to help your organization to understand, okay, I need a 2-week testing window, I need a 2-week scripting window, and then I need 3 days for a review cycle. Use the terminology that's there, because I think sometimes what these amazing people within organizations do, and I know that I've been there in that position myself, you don't want to be the one who says this isn't possible or I can't do this. So you take on this actually impossible amount of work and you end up pushing yourself to deliver something. And then you're compromising. And that's the thing, you're compromising your standards. And, I always kind of say that if you were to ask your finance team to do a financial audit, there would be a really clear set structure on how they would insist that needs to happen. And there's no negotiation there, because it's a financial audit. For some reason, and this is where we need to raise the profile of our industry, we seem to really minimize the amount of work that's done, because in the past, if you've been involved in face-to-face training, that work stream can be a lot shorter. You don't have all of these technical, digital testing and external stakeholder requirements. A lot of it is on the personality of the individual and the charisma and their own knowledge and how well they can deliver that in a training course face-to-face. But you can be very dynamic in the way that you deliver face-to-face training. When you are putting something that is digital learning out there, it is set in stone almost. What you put out is what goes out. So you need to be able to give it the time to be able to do it. And if you're really not getting through, what I'd say is engage with my team, and we'll do a proposal and we'll make it really clear of what is required to pull this off. And I think that just having that comparison point is a great reality check for organizations. So get in touch with us. We'd love to sort of, say, okay, let's compare this. Let's take it to market and say, how would it be done by an agency? And that in itself, I think, would be a really great opportunity for to help our people within our community to communicate that to organizations.
And I think that's one of the problems we've got now, is that, you go to a sponsor and the sponsor goes, well, look at what, you can get on YouTube, and look what you can get here and so on. And, grabbing free photos from all over the place that aren't actually free, copyright issues and all of that stuff, which is why I think that the conversation, the chat has been amazing. The chat where we've been talking about where you get free images from and stuff like that. People don't necessarily understand necessarily the cost. And my apologies, Dominica, about the squeak in my chair. There's a little bit of a squeak there, and I do apologise.
Gosh, we have a boisterous audience, Andrew. If they are,
I tell you, I thought, this is going to be a good session. I thought this would be busy, but there we go. But that idea about cost, I think, is really, really interesting, because we don't necessarily understand the true cost because of everything that we're going along and then actually just offering up for people. And it's helping people understand exactly, as you say, what to leave out is as important as what to keep in, which I think is spot on. I think we've possibly got time for one more question. Let me have a look. Let's see if we can pull one out. Let's see if we can pull what would be the best question. We'll do the TAP diploma one. So would you recommend TAP diplomas?
I wouldn't recommend any specific qualification without really understanding who the individual is, what their requirements are. However, what I will say to caveat that is that we are, as an industry, all about having this first for knowledge, okay? And so I think that any qualification, any kind of learning, any kind of program or course that you can go on, whether that is a qualified, accredited program like TAP, or something that your employer will sponsor. There's a fantastic what I call the Netflix for learning. It's called Masterclass, and it's where Serena Williams will teach you about tennis, and Anna Wintour will teach you about creativity and leadership. I would say I'm very pro filling the mind with information and knowledge, and then do something about it. So I would say, I'm not saying do it or don't do it. It really depends on your individual circumstances. There may be something that's better suited suited to you, based on your budget and your requirements. But generally, I would say that, educating ourselves with information is so important. So I would say if you have an opportunity to do it, please do, but please just do an assessment of whether that really is the right qualification and the right learning for you, because there is so much that is out there. And I think that our industry is evolving really quickly. Pre-COVID, digital learning was definitely something that, most organizations were concerned about. Now, every single organization doesn't have a choice. They need to engage with their staff in this way. This is how they will grow and retain and inspire and communicate with organizations. And I think that with TAP, it may be right, but there may also be something else out there. I know that's not very helpful, but it's really difficult to give specific advice. One of the things that I love about, I think the phrase is, the chat has been popping today, which is amazing.
It's fizzing. The chat is absolutely fizzing. And it's a brilliant comment from Isaac saying, he did the TAP course and it was useful to start. Yeah,
and I think that, that there are definitely lots of things out there, but equally, it really just depends. But however, this buzz, this fizz, this community, this asking questions, being curious, not being afraid to challenge. I love it that some people have said, I disagree. I love it that some people are coming up with counter arguments. Do that. That is how we learn. We're all in this together. And, I'd urge you to continue the conversation with us. We have events all the time, virtually, and we look forward to having them face to face as well now, as the world starts to get a little more, to some sort of semblance of normality. Please keep in touch with us. We'll post those details on, and we're doing another session tomorrow as well. So please check out our session tomorrow afternoon that we have to actually show you some of the work.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Jasmine, because we are out of time. We have done the time. I just want to say thank you, first of all, for, as always, smart people asking smart questions of smart people always makes for a really interesting session. As this has been buzzing, I've really, really enjoyed this one. The chat, somebody asked in the chat, Polly, I think it was, can we keep the chat live for the afternoon? Polly, the chat will stay live for 6 months. So you can keep coming back to here and you can keep posting questions and comments back with each other for the next 6 months. Feel free to use this as a space to have a conversation. You've created a community and a cohort now, which I think is brilliant. So be part of that community in that cohort and work together. And there you are. You've created an action learning set all focused around this. I will ask Jasmine, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way? Is it through LinkedIn or email, or what's the best way for people to contact you?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn. Also, my marketing manager is going to be very upset with me now, but yes, LinkedIn is great. You can email me, jasmine.kundra@cursim.com. That's nice and easy. cursim.com, you can see it there. But get in touch. We've got you can contact us through our website, www.omniplex.co. That's omniplex.co, and we're on LinkedIn. We will get back to you. Just title your message or your email LTDX session. And do you know what? For tomorrow, we'll create a little bit.ly link so people can just click somewhere and be able to get in touch with us. All the normal channels. I'd love to hear from absolutely anybody. It doesn't matter what you want. If you want to have this conversation, we're in the process of building an alumni community for those that are in digital learning, because we think there needs to be a place where everybody can come and chat and share and debate, not just have easy conversations, but actually have some difficult conversations. Please keep in conversation with us. And thank you, Andrew, for, again, just another fantastic learning technologies. I think you guys are doing an amazing job in keeping the community going in this. And thank you so much. It's not easy.
That's very, very kind of you to say, Jasmine, but it's not me. All I do is I just connect people. That's all I do. And Polly, I think, has summed it up. She says, can I say this is one of the best webinars I've watched, and I watch a lot. So there we go. Well done, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you again, Jasmine. And we'll see you all again in a short while for our next session. Thank you very much, everybody.